What will you do if one day you go into your church and you find your pastor furious, throwing over tables and chairs all over the place and yelling and screaming at all the church members and accusing them of all sorts of things? Well, to begin with, it'll be a very, very shocking episode, and you probably think your pastor is having an episode and he's not well in the head. But in the passage of John chapter 2 that we are looking at today, we see Jesus being zealous about how the people were mistreating the house of God, the temple. He was filled with righteous anger. He was angry because they were misusing the place and they were misleading the people. But in this passage, in this chapter, we also see another side of Jesus, where he is in a community function, a wedding, and he also sees the need for joy and celebration, and when something was lacking in that opportunity, God, through Jesus, also does this miracle of turning water into wine. And in this chapter, we see how God reveals his divine glory through the miracle and the zealousness that he has for the house of God. Hi, I'm Pastor JD, and thank you for joining me in the study of John's Gospel. And can I encourage you, please read chapter 2 even before you start following this video. And secondly, remember, as you study the Word, as you study this chapter, at the end of each chapter, remember to sit down and reflect. How is this passage, how is this chapter, how are these words going to transform my life? Reflect on them. How can I apply them to my daily life? And that's the best way to study a Bible. If you find this study helpful in your understanding, please share it with someone who will benefit the same. You know, it's simple study, it's a free study. Why want to keep it to yourself? Share it so others will benefit just as you are as well. Grab a cup of hot drink, your notebooks and Bibles, and let's begin. Now, you can break John chapter 2 into 4 sections. We can outline them into 4 sections. The first one is the fantastic story of wedding in Cana. We all love that. And in chapter 2, verse 1 to 11, we see the wedding at Cana. And then we see 12 to 22, Jesus clears the temple. That's when he turns the tables. And then, did I say 4? It's just 3. Thirdly, we see Jesus knows what's in the heart of the people. So he was not really taken up by what people were saying because he could see the heart. Wedding at Cana. Jesus turns water into wine. His first public miracle. Now, when you read that passage, you will realize Jesus shows a kind of discontentment. He's not really happy with his mother. It's like, why are you doing this to me? It's not my time yet. I'm not ready to do this. And Mary just trusts that Jesus is able to fix the problem, and she tells the workers, the servants in the house, and they say, go and just obey him, listen to what he says. I've always thought about this story, even as a young person growing up. Whenever I read this or heard about this, I thought about those servants a bit more than everybody else. You know why? There was a shortage of the main drink in the wedding, and in the Jewish traditions and context, wine kind of symbolizes the joy and celebration as well. And if a host does not have enough wine at the wedding, it almost becomes a dishonor to the family. It's like, you didn't do well. Your wedding will be known for not having enough wine. So can you imagine the servants were now responsible to make sure everybody gets enough? I suppose in other places when such things happen, they maybe diluted the wine. I'm not sure what they did. But here, something crazy, let me just use the word crazy, happens. A woman I mean, I don't know whether they fully knew Mary, the host of the home would definitely know Mary. That's why she's invited. But the servants, I'm not sure. She points out to these servants and say, "Go, listen to my son. He'll fix this problem." To compound the issue with the servants, he says, "Go and grab those jars and fill them with water." What? Mary, you must be crazy, and your son must be delusional. We've got a problem to fix. Why are you asking us to do this? Well, at least that's what I felt every time I thought about this passage. So as I was preparing this, I thought about it again. But they did. That's the good thing about the whole thing. They did. They did obey. They did follow what they were instructed to do. And when the jars of clay were filled with water, Jesus prayed over them. And then we know the story of how they took the water to the hosts, and it was the best wine. It was later in the day, and the host says, "Where have you kept this wine?" Now, Jesus demonstrates his power to transform. He can change things. I mean, it almost becomes a joke now when people talk about turning wine into water. But I think it's a revelation of the ability of Jesus to do anything, to transform anything. I think in life there are more important things to transform than just water to wine, isn't there? It's like transforming of hearts, transforming of lives, transforming of an evil situation to safety, transforming evil to good, transforming what that's dead to life. I think those things are more important. But Jesus demonstrates something that is unheard of, completely impossible, unthinkable, undoable, turning water into wine. The substance is completely different. One is just pure H2O. The other one is a juice from a fruit that is fermenting, and then that's how it's done. And it's like it's just, you cannot comprehend how this is possible. But this passage demonstrates that Jesus can. He can change things, and it also shows that he cares for people's needs, even though he was a little bit, shift with his mother. It was like, why? But he cares for people's situations, and he was part of a normal person's life, a couple getting married. He was part of it, and I think that shows that God is a part of our daily lives, and he's seeking to transform our lives to turn towards him, and he cares for us, and nothing is impossible. And I think that's a beautiful thing to take away from this, to see from this passage. The second one is verse 12 to 22. Jesus clears the temple. Now, it's a contrast, isn't it, from caring and doing something to fix. Now here he's destroying, he's breaking, he's throwing things out. Jesus drives out merchants from the temple courts. He was so angry. In the Bible, this is what we call righteous anger. He was angry not because he didn't get something, or somebody shamed him or put him down or called him names. No, that's not why he was angry. He was not angry for himself, but he was angry that the temple of God, the house of prayer, was defiled by money-minded people, corrupt people with ulterior motives that had nothing to do with God. And he was just frustrated and angry of how this little temple organization has become. To make things worse, they were not just cheating and corrupt, they were cheating the poor. They were squeezing the money out of the poor, and the money changers. The poor who wanted to seek God now had to pay the temple. These are horrible things, and Jesus just couldn't take this kind of injustice, unfair behavior. And then when he was confronted, about this whole saga, he prophesies about his own death and resurrection. He says, "Destroy this temple and I will build it up in 3 days." And of course, they were all thinking about the temple in Jerusalem, the building, but he was referring to himself as the temple. You destroy it, I'll build it up in 3 days. And then it flows on into verse 23 to 25, where many believed in the signs and miracles he performed. And they kind of declared a kind of declaration of faith and belief in Jesus for what he was doing, and they were following him. But Jesus kind of didn't buy into that. It's like, many of those people were just doing and saying that they were believing and following because they saw these miracles. In a sense, anyone who does magic, they will just follow them. So Jesus says, no, I'm not convinced because you say certain things. And it can be true for us. Sometimes we can say words without meaning, and God knows. Why does God know? Jesus sees into the heart and knows true belief. Whether you are a person of true faith and belief, we can put on a self in the church and out there in the marketplace, in the streets, with friends and families and functions. We can behave like pious, holy people. But Jesus knows your heart. Remember this whole story when David was anointed by the prophet Samuel. Samuel was looking for someone with a strong, big stature, someone who looked like a king, a face. But God told him, men sees the face, but I see the heart. God sees the heart. Old Testament. And here in the New Testament we see Jesus sees the heart of the people. So we need to be aware of that. What is our heart filled with? What does Jesus see in us? We can lie and cheat about our piousness and religiosity among people, but we cannot cheat Jesus. So we need to be careful. Well, let me just go through some of my favorite standouts from this chapter. Verse 5, do whatever he tells you. Mary telling the servants at the wedding, do whatever he tells you. And I think if you can just literally take that out, I think it can be applicable for us today. Do whatever Jesus tells us. Obey his word. Verse 11, this was the first of the signs. He thus revealed his glory. Before this, he was a carpenter's son. He probably was doing some carpentry himself. And he was teaching great things, so people were following. But there was no true revelation of his power on earth. And this is the first miracle, the kind of, so in a sense, it also kind of sparks the faith of all those who were there. It's like, can you imagine Mary has not seen Jesus kind of do anything in a ministry's miracle sense. And when she knew he was special, but to see him do that, her faith must have just exploded. An affirmation of all that she has seen and heard. The disciples, the followers, they're like, wow, this rabbi, this master is different than everyone else that we've seen before. He's unique. And he did the impossible, turning water into wine. So it looks like a very trivial function, but it's revealing the glory and power of God that was at work in Jesus, where the impossible transformation can take place. Verse 16, stop turning my father's house into a market. Stop turning my father's house into a market. The house of God is for worship, for prayer, for listening to his word, for us to participate and have communion with God and fellowship with one another in the Lord's Supper. It's a time dedicated for God, a place dedicated for God, set apart for God's people to come to God and learn and grow together. But do not turn it to a marketplace. How many of our churches today have become a marketplace? How many of our churches today are doing things that have got nothing to do with God? Verse 19, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. Jesus kind of gives a hint and reveals of the purpose that he was there for. I don't fully think at that stage so early that disciples realized that he was talking about his death and resurrection. But in hindsight, even for John to write this in his gospel, to kind of reveal that, yeah, Jesus did tell us. We didn't understand what he was saying, but now it all makes sense. So Jesus was clear about his purpose on earth. He knew what was in each person's heart, verse 25. As I mentioned earlier, he knows what's in your heart. Let me just run through key takeaways for us today so that we can try our best to apply them into our lives. Application is very important, as I always say. Jesus brings joy and transformation, symbolized in the wine. And so when you talk about salvation, faith, following Jesus, now it's all not to be for doom and gloom, you can't have fun, that kind of life. Jesus brings joy and transformation. Believing Jesus brings lots of satisfaction and joy in life. Knowing that your life is safe in his hands and having faith in him brings great joy in life. And I believe that. His miracles reveal glory and build faith, not just amazement. So he was not just doing magic show. I think there are lots of people in that crowd were wanting to see magic. Show us a sign, show us a sign. Almost like a sense of mockery as well. But we see that Jesus did that to reveal his glory, but also to build faith. Every miracle that Jesus performed was to build faith, that following that he could proclaim the good news so that they will believe. Faith, believe. True worship must be pure and centered on God, not profit. Not profit. The Bible tells us you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. It's either or. Money represents the things of the world. God is apart from the world in what he offers us. And when we follow him, the joy, the peace, the happiness, the life that we receive, no money can give us. So true worship of God has to be pure and centered on him and him alone, not on amazement and entertainment, not on profit. So make sure in your ministry, in your church, in your life, you do not use God for profit. Make sure the Spirit of God is using you to work in you and through you to bring the truth of his good news that many may be reconciled back to the Father for the very purpose that Jesus came. So our churches must be clear about our mission, our goal and our purpose. We are not just there to entertain people. We are not just there to make profit. We are there to share the good news of Jesus. Let's be clear about that. Jesus knows the motives of every heart. You can say anything you want. He knows your heart. When Jesus sees your heart today, what does he see? Next thing is his resurrection is the foundation of faith and hope. So when he talked about rebuilding the body, if you destroy it after 3 days, he's talking about the resurrection. And the resurrection of Jesus, as Paul says later on in the New Testament, is the foundation of our faith and hope. Without resurrection, everything that we talk about in our religion and faith is useless. All our faith, our religion, our belief system is centered on the resurrection of Jesus. And so he hints on that in this passage. And finally, I encourage you, as much as Jesus corrects us when we do wrong, as long as he is unhappy as in throwing out tables, he also cares for your needs. See, so be truthful, be honest, be sincere with God every day. I hope this passage will be a blessing to you and your growth in faith. Do you know, I'm told that if you subscribe, I didn't want to say this the last time, if you subscribe, you'll get notification of my next videos. All right, so subscribe so that you can get more learning, not because of YouTube. Who knew, yeah? Please share it with someone or a group who might benefit this passage just like you. God bless. See you next time in John chapter 3, and make sure you read it before you start watching the video. God bless. Bye.